welcome to another tutorial on Photoshop. This time I will be covering layers. I'll be going over the basics of how layers work, the different types of layers, and some of the things you can do with them that may help you in your quest to make girls look prettier, products more appealing, or maybe just have your cat speak poor English. Let's begin. Start a new document inside of Photoshop. You get a white background over here. It's locked, it's pretty much just there, and you can go ahead and paint on it. It's one layer, and every time you paint over something, it's permanently there. You can't go back to it, you can't move that last line around. So what you end up doing is creating a new layer. Down here in the Layers palette, there's a specific button, New Layer, and it opens up, and what you get is a transparent sheet. Now you can think of this as a sheet of glass on top of your white background layer. Now the background layer you're not exactly stuck with. You can get rid of it at any point. It is locked, so it's a little bit more difficult, but if you double click on the name, it opens up a dialog where you can name your layer crap, and it turns into just a white unlocked layer. From here you can pretty much delete it, move it around on top of other layers. But for the most part, I just pretty much get rid of this. I work with new layers. So to help demonstrate exactly what goes on with Photoshop, I've created this little dialog here. So basically you can consider all layers to be a sheet of glass stacked on top of each other. As you can see here, flat sheets and a little bit three-dimensional here. I got Jeff the Ninja on one of my layers, specifically this one here, and I can go ahead and turn off that layer, so this represents this layer here. Demonstrate some of the different things that we can do with layers. I have Jeff the Ninja and a random little ghost guy over here. Now, in a layer, you can pretty much move a layer around in the stack, clicking and dragging it, and what that does is place it on top of or below the other layer. So, I'm going to take Jeff here and move him over, and right now he's on top of the ghost. You can't see the ghost's arm or part of its tail. I'm going to move the ghost I'm going to move the ghost on top of Jeff, and vice versa. You can also group layers into a group or a folder, which helps organize things once you get many layers going. Down the bottom right of the Layers palette, there's a folder icon called Groups. If you click that, it just creates a folder, and you can click and drag any layer into or out of the group. Layers can consist of different types of objects: pixels, vector, text, or more recently 3D objects and video footage. Typically speaking, by example, pictures are what you create using the paintbrush or pencil tool. Vector objects are created by the pen or the shape tools. Text is created by the text tool and can be considered much like the vector object in that it is highly rescalable without degradation. The image stays perfectly clear no matter what size you make it, the size of your thumb or the size of a billboard. 3D layers and video footage are exclusive to newer, extended versions of Photoshop and are thus for crazy professionals with a lot of money. I'm not going to be going over those here, so no worry. What I have up here is a text layer, which is re-editable. I can just click on it and retype however I want. A raster layer, which is the pixels, more commonly just anything that you've painted. I have here the ghost here, and the vector is my background, which is a standard gradient with a vector mask applied to it. I'll be going over masks later, but the vector shape is re-editable as an odd little shape. It's not just a pixel. It's a line filled with what I have a gradient. Things with layers besides just rearranging them on top of one another. You can also change the layer's blending mode, which will change how the layer interacts with layers below it. For this example, I'm going to take my ghost and I'm just going to cycle through the blending mode for the ghost. Now this takes what pixel is in that layer and changes how it displays on top of other pixels below it. You can get a lot of different styles with this, different effects, but generally becomes a little bit more confusing. You can go ahead and experiment with these, but I warn you, you can lose a lot of your life just doing so. So for now I'm going to keep him at normal, but I definitely want to make my ghost a little bit more ghost-like. So I'm going to go over here and change his opacity. Now opacity just makes him more transparent or more opaque, showing off whatever layer is below him. Fill is a lot like opacity, but you don't have to get into that now. It gets a little bit confusing. So until you've used Photoshop for a long time, I would suggest just forgetting fill is even there. Just play around with opacity for now. You can take a layer or group of layers and turn it into what's called a smart object. This is a lot like a group, except for it has additional benefits. I have Jeff here, who is himself a smart object. I'm going to double click on him, which is going to open up the smart object, which is many layers inside of a completely new document, as you can see here. I have Jeff's sword, Jeff's outline, Jeff's shading, the color for Jeff, and his background sword sheath, as well as text for Jeff. This keeps the original image but still allows me to edit or manipulate it and always go back to Jeff's original state. On top of that, I can go in and edit parts of Jeff here in this document, and when I go back to my tutorial on mask here, it will update here. The other things you can do with layers is layer effects, which I'll show you here. So some of the common stuff that you can do with layer effects are adding a drop shadow. Any layer effect will follow the painted pixels in your layer. So when I add a drop shadow, I'm going to up the opacity so you can see this better. It will follow Jeff's outline precisely and add a drop shadow to him. Now this is really powerful because you don't have to paint a shadow or an outline yourself. You can have Photoshop do it. That way when you change the actual object, the layer style itself will update to it, and you can go back and change the drop shadow however you want. I'm going to take that off for now. One of the other things you can do, as I have here on the sword, I did not feel like going in and drawing an outline, so I took an effect and added in a stroke. I can go back in and change the size of the stroke, or take it off completely. Effects can be very powerful and can save you a lot of time. But for now, I'm going to leave Jeff and work on my next tutorial for masks.